Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Suzanne Gundersen of Transform Connections. I offer stress resilient solutions that help people be empowered to heal. And I'm joined today with Leckey Harrison, who is one of my colleagues in this wonderful world of stress, trauma healing, and is an expert in his own right. So today's topic in our series of conversations that we're going to be bringing to you is around acute versus chronic stress. It's such a huge topic, but let me have Leckey introduce himself.
Well, as she said, my name is Leckey Harrison. I own and operate a business called Raise Your Resilience. Add a .com, and there it is on the website. I empower people to heal themselves using an innate mechanism, and it integrates the relationship between stress and trauma. But for now, let's discuss what it means and the difference between acute and chronic stress when it comes to how it affects us as individuals.
Great. Yes, let's have that conversation for sure. I think so many people just say the word stress and it's just like such a huge word. And we want to break it down and pack it a little bit for people to understand a little bit better. When I first started learning about stress, I would explain it to, I would understand it to be something that, would occur when maybe I couldn't find my keys, or when I lost my shoes, or I missed the exit, or I was late for a meeting, or, something kind of came in the way of a distraction. That kind of was that quick, like, oh no, something's wrong. That's what I always kind of considered as stress. And then, after I kind of experienced it through that lens of that, what we now know as acute, I was learning that there was these more prolonged things in my life, like, oh, I don't necessarily like this job I'm doing every day, or gosh, this relationship I'm in, I'm having a hard time with this person that I just don't know how to communicate with, or, one of my family members had a chronic illness that, just not going away. And I said, wow, I mean, that's stress too. These things that just aren't going away, and that there really is a difference between the two. And the body still uses the same stress response for it. It's just, they're just two different styles. So tell me, what are your thoughts on acute stress?
Acute, well, that's interesting that you just described it, because in our last conversation about the nature of stress, those things, we say, there's something wrong. When really the response to I can't find my keys or I'm late to a meeting, somehow our brain interprets that as a threat. So there's that perception of threat. If we reframed it as I feel threatened, we might actually stop and say, why? How is this a threat to me? And that would help us come into a better relationship with what our body's responding to. But yeah, for most part, that's how we respond to things. Or like, where are my car keys? Oh, well, I locked them in the car. I threw them up on the dashboard. There they are. So acute means, and I'm coming from this as in emergency medicine. And that meant that an acute experience was, it happened, it was over. And essentially, according to Robert Sapolsky, that's how stress has evolved in the human organism. It was meant to be a cycle, had a clear beginning and a clear end. And Peter Levine also talks about that. It's interesting, in his book, In an Unspoken Voice, the first thing he does is he thanks ethology, not psychology, but it was from that field that he really learned how this stress response is actually a cycle. And what actually closes that cycle out. So Sapolsky would say that, yeah, we've gone from, and chronic stress is completely man-made, because what used to be a cycle started, is now become something that's chronic. And as we talked about a little bit in the last video, when that cycle does not complete and shut off, the body stays in an alert state, which is problematic, because if you begin to look at it a little bit more granularly, there's the cardiovascular response, there's the
oh yeah, break it down to every single business body system, that could be affected affected. The respiratory system, cardiovascular, the endocrine system, musculoskeletal system, on and on and on. Every system is engaged to go and keep you alive, in that threat.
And that's what causes a lot of the illnesses. I mean, Sapolsky wrote a book about it, Why the Zebra Doesn't Get Ulcers. And that, though, is the fruit of chronic stress, of not closing those, because you close out those systems, your endocrine system balances, your digestive system comes back online, your immune system, and these days we're talking about immune systems rather prolifically because of this virus. But if you're under chronic stress, and I like that you differentiated lost my keys versus something like a chronic illness. There's a great example. The chronic illness isn't a headache that had a start and then an end. It starts, and I've been living with this, so I don't see an end.
Right. That's the difference between acute and chronic, is that acute are things that come into your perception as threat that you can resolve quickly. And then do resolve quickly. And then it's kind of like that heightened up, and then the expansion of the release. But when you have something that is prolonged and you go, and you don't stop going up, 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 or you stay there and you hold on to it, or worse, now you compound it with more stress and more stress and more stress, the body can't complete and come down again. And so you get stuck up there, and that's what chronic stress is the stress response is just stuck up in that heightened state of arousal where you've now left your parasympathetic, ventral vagal, social engagement. You haven't been able to resolve that stress, and you continue up on that stress ladder. And now your sympathetic nervous system is involved, where all your body systems start to rise up and get ready to do that fight or flight. The blood leaves the brain, the blood leaves the body, goes to limbs and says, who are we fighting? Who are we flighting from? And if we can't resolve it there, then we continue to go up that stress response, and we get into that trauma realm. But for purposes of this conversation, just talking about acute versus chronic, so much of the world today, is in our awareness, and so much is so threatening to us because we don't know what it means for our survival, and we are designed to survive, and because we've got a thinking mind, and we have social engagement in the ventral vagal nervous system to help us be able to come back to safety, we don't yet know how to facilitate that, and so we get stuck in these stages of prolonged stress, which is now what we call chronic stress, which means we just haven't been able to resolve the stress response. It's the same stress response, but we're stuck on the ladder of it. And then and then worse, we get compounded with other stresses that just keep us feeling overwhelmed and unable to discharge, regulate, release, integrate, and restore back to goodness again. And some people live their whole life in that chronic stress state.
I liked your physical demonstration.
Yeah.
I think where we get tripped up is it's not all at once that we do this with chronic stress. If you were to take that in just little steps every time, you wouldn't notice the change in a little step because your shoulders went up nicely. You take that breath in, your diaphragm is now extended. But what happens in stress is then that starts to, when your breathing gets shallow, it's not even that big a breath, and we don't even notice it. And as the shoulders begin to creep up, what does that start to look like? That looks like the posture of old age. You put a hump in the back and add that, that's exactly what that is, because these core muscles respond to that and stay tight. But
yeah, I mean, this is what we've been learning and studying for years and years, which is that the body contracts in response to threat, and then it wants to expand and release. But we spend so much of our lives in human form that in with our modern survival strategy of social engagement, not being able to be socially engaged in the way that helps us still feel safe and connected. So we hold on to those contractions. And like you said, every year we just inch up and inch until it's so contracted.
Yeah.
And then what do? I mean, when we're a baby and we're born, our fingers are open, and then we just continue to kind of crouch in through life as we have a really hard time learning how to do that contraction, expansion, fluidity that we're here to learn within our nervous system that can help us use that stress response efficiently and avoid, you know, staying in those states of chronic stress. So acute meaning something that's fast and comes into your awareness and is easily resolved. Chronic is that little inch by inch that compounds and compounds and compounds, in addition to other influences coming in to compound it even further until we're just completely stuck.
Yep.
And that's where people have pain, disease, physical, emotional, and mental, and we can get stuck in that line. And that's what I see the difference between acute and chronic.
Acute and chronic stress. It's like having a headache versus something that has no apparent end. I mean, I would have said cancer, but cancer does unfortunately have a very defined end for a lot of people. I like that. And one of the things I was discussing last night in my self-defense class with people, because at the end we do some different kinds of stretches that are more fascia-oriented than muscle-oriented. But in terms of moving the eyes, if most people want to go from left to right, it's a series of static movements.
Mm-hmm.
And that's called, because it's not smooth, we don't use the muscles of our eyes very much at all. So what ends up happening is they learn to take these jumps. And that's what Thomas Hanna called somatic amnesia. And being able to get that flow back is part of what he decided, because he saw the same thing, this chronic stress response that comes forward, that locks into the body.
The contraction. Mm-hmm.
What he was working on was learning and teaching people, and his little book has got these little wooden models that he shapes and the exercises, which I thought was pretty inventive for the time. But it's learning how to get that full range of motion back in your shoulder, and so it's or wherever in the body it is. But he saw the same exact.
This is why we offer our resilience solutions to help people unwind that contraction, so that we can leave those chronic states and come back through the stress response back to homeostasis. So I know I want to keep these videos short, and so I want to just say I hope this video was helpful for a lot of people. Didn't mean to cut Leckey off there, but I know he and I could talk for hours. So we'll just end the video here and say thank you so much for watching and listening to us today. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below this video, no matter where it's posted. And feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any questions. And we'll see you on the next video. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.